everyone. Thank you again for joining us in another episode of Coaching Conversations with myself, Kapil and Paul. Today, we're delighted to have a new guest on the show today. Her name is Becky Balzano. She was actually my very first coach about 3 years ago, and I've been following her work ever since. She is an NLP practitioner, and she is an ICF accredited performance personal coach as well. And she seeks to help her clients to create success and develop their success in both the personal and professional life. So without further ado, we would like to welcome Becky onto the show. Thank you, Becky.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much, Kapil and Paul, for having me on this Coaching Conversations this morning. It's really lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Becky. There are two things that I know we're going to talk about, two very important topics, and one is resilience and the other one is well-being. So I thought if you wanted to talk about resilience and how you deal with that in your professional life and maybe personal life, that would be great.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a really kind of timely conversation as well at the moment, isn't it, with everything that's going on for people. This idea of having better resilience is really key to how we kind of perform in the world, how we are, how we're feeling. And it's something that's, an area that I really love to work in, and something that's, quite important for me as well. I know certainly over the last couple of years that I've had to really build this resilience. And we know that it is one of our key skills, and so we can actually develop it. It's not something like your IQ that you are born with, a set number. Our EQ essentially is something that we can develop, and resilience is part of our emotional intelligence. So it's something that I find really fascinating and really interesting, and I work with organizations to help their employees develop their resilience so that they can manage stressful situations, so that they can be more productive, more innovative, more creative, more focused at work. And essentially, if you are all of those things, if you're taking your work performance seriously and you're taking your well-being seriously, you're more resilient and you're more able to deal with all of the knocks of life. The knocks will always be there, but if you have that resilience, you can protect against it.
So I wonder, Becky, because resilience is quite a big topic, is that something which has actually stemmed from your own life, or is that something that you just came across through research? How did it come about?
I think, like lots of these things, our own experiences really influence the area of work that we go into. And so for me, definitely, growing up, I have an alcoholic father. Well, he actually hasn't drunk for probably 30 years now, so he's been through all of that program. My brother is a heroin addict, although he is in recovery as well. And so I've had that quite kind of volatile childhood in some senses, and so I had to kind of build my resilience. And I just noticed how useful it is in our lives if you are resilient. And then much more recently, I've had big kind of life changes. My mother passed away 18 months ago, and I've separated from my marriage, and I've moved house, and I've done lots of those things that happen to a lot of people. And I think if you are resilient, you have that bounce back ability. You are able to deal with those knocks, those waves that come. You don't end up drowning. You learn to swim, you learn to get through it, and you learn the lessons within those things as well. So I think having those resilient skills, that's what's going to get you to where you want to go, and that's what's going to stop you essentially being knocked off of your feet.
That sounds really interesting. And how does this work when you're working in organizations around resilience?
So how it works is when I go into organizations and I work with them, I deliver a program. It's a combination really of coaching and teaching. And so I suppose you can call it, we can get into the whole conversation of, mentoring, coaching and the differences between them all. But essentially, it really needs to work with developing that individual's self-awareness and helping them to see where they might need to build their resilience, and then teaching them how they might do that. So it might be that they don't have very many boundaries, and then how do we create boundaries in our lives? How do we create that kind of strong internal foundation. So we teach the resilience in terms of helping people to manage their emotions, helping them to understand the story in their head, their limiting beliefs, what they think is true, helping them to do all of those kind of foundational pieces as well, the more tangible things that they can do to build resilience. So that's things like your diet, your exercise, your sleep, your water, your meditation, all of those pieces to help you do what I would call then the more kind of heavy lifting practices of resilience, of internal boundaries and internal inquiry, and those sorts of things. So it's a real combination of coaching and teaching, essentially.
So let's say if you had a client who required this, building this resilience, through certain steps and certain time, how would you go around helping that client to actually build that resilience from the ground up?
Well, I think that the first is the awareness, is helping them recognize maybe what's going to happen if they don't have this resilience, and then helping them recognize, well, here's where you want to be and here's where you are now. So coaching is often this gap analysis, isn't it, between this is where I am now and this is where I want to be. And so in the conversations, the coaching conversations that I would have with that client, we draw out, specifically where you are now and specifically where you want to get. So I use that word specifically because often people will say, well, I want to be more resilient, I want to be fitter, and you have to be really specific and curious about, well, what that means for that person. So yeah, it would be through the coaching conversations. We would set outcomes or goals, some people like to use, or KPIs or whatever terminology is good for them, and then we work towards that. And I help them to identify maybe limiting beliefs. Maybe it's that they don't have the tools, maybe they don't have the belief, maybe they don't have the understanding and the knowledge that they need. And we work on helping them to get that themselves and not relying on me. We never want to be creating any kind of dependence within the coaching relationship. It's all about that person doing that for themselves. But I would really tap into their motivation behind that. So I think if they had been sent by their company on a resilience course but it wasn't something that they wanted to do, that's going to be a bit of an issue. And so I always checking in. We do an ecology check with clients about, is this really your goal, or has somebody said you need to do XYZ? Has society taught you that you need to be thinner? Or do you actually want to have a healthier diet to give you more energy? It's quite subtle. So it's important that we tap into the person's internal motivations and drive for doing something.
Yeah, that's something that I was just thinking about as you were talking about this and how you're working with the clients, and exactly the internal motivational pathway in us. And if we can access that, then we will be successful, because it comes from the inside and not from the outside. That sounds really,
Yes.
really fascinating, the way you describe that when you are working with clients. So when you are working with the organizations, what do you find might be some of the biggest stumbling blocks that you have come across?
Well, one thing we come across firstly is, as I just mentioned, that maybe people have been sent on a course. So they might have been told, well, you need to go and do this fluffy well-being thing. HR has sent you on a course. And so they may not in the first place actually even want to be there. But another thing is that I think some people don't recognize how beneficial this is. They don't recognize, they'll say, well, I function fine. I eat rubbish all day and I don't exercise and I sit at my desk and I don't but I'm doing fine. They don't have an awareness yet of how much better they can feel. I think that the World Health Organization has a study which shows that eating a nutritionally healthy diet can increase productivity by 20%. Now, that's just diet. Now, if you applied all of the other tools that we're talking about, imagine how much more productive you would be. And I know that sounds, pretty crude and capitalist, just trying to get your workers to work harder, but how much better they would feel. So I think sometimes people don't have a recognition of actually how bad they're feeling or bad things are versus actually how good it can be. Or they're sent on a course. And then I think another real key piece is that they don't have the belief that they can change. And motivational interviewing techniques actually really focuses on this idea of helping somebody understand that absolutely you can change. It's something that we can all do. We are capable of redirecting our thinking, of creating new habits, of essentially being a different person by creating those new neural pathways and thinking differently. So I think helping them to identify that, yes, you can, and you know, there's all sorts of things that we can show to demonstrate. I mean, for example, if you have learned to drive a car, there probably was a time when you weren't able, and you probably thought, I'm never going to be able to do this. So that's just a kind of a small example, but I would be drawing on their own life examples. So I'd be asking them, think of a time when there was, you know, something you didn't believe was true, or think of a time when you couldn't do that thing and you thought you couldn't. You know, we can use examples as well of changing beliefs. There's a fantastic NLP model called the Museum of Old Beliefs, and we show people through this, walk them through this technique and show them, well, you used to believe in Father Christmas, you used to believe in the tooth fairy, and actually you used to believe that you couldn't do that skill that you now can do. You believe that the sun will rise every morning. So I think there's lots of ways we can show people that they can change, and what it would feel like if their life was different.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought up, you know, looking at self-limiting beliefs, and I think this applies to everyone really. When it's a matter of being aware that you want to do something, and you think to yourself, okay, I can't do that because I never have done it before, and then you go through this journey of actually unpicking what you can do, what you can't do, and then suddenly you get to a new sort of level where actually, you know what, I can do something, and you start to get better and better as well.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Were there any particular clients who had this very big negative or self-limiting belief about a certain topic or certain aspect about themselves, into which you help them to uncover and actually progress them within their life?
There's been yeah, I mean, there's been a few. I started off working quite a lot with people who wanted to change eating habits, and I've also done a course in addiction recovery, and those sorts of clients will very much have an identity of, I am an addict, I am an alcoholic, I am a smoker, I've always been like this. And so I can think of, you know, clients who think like that. Also, you know, I'm working with a medical consultant at the moment, and he has an identity or a belief that you, in order to do this high stress job, you can't be healthy at the same time. You have to be always on go and always striving for more, and that's what you need to be doing. And you know, through the work that I've done with him, actually now we've kind of switched that round and said, well, you can't be doing that work if you're not healthy, if you're not, you know, you're going to burn out. And you know, and I've had and come across other clients who previously have had burnouts, or you know, patches of depression where that's happened.
Yeah, that sounds like something that most of us probably can recognize in one format or another, these kind of thoughts that drives us in one way or another. And as you're saying, if you are aware of things, you can change them, but if you're not, you can't. I was just wondering, because if we're looking about resilience and well-being, where does stress fit in with all of that in your experience?
Well, I think stress comes, you know, a certain amount of stress is good for us. You know, you look at the Yerkes-Dodson performance curve, and we can see that as the pressure goes up, so does the performance. And you can see that people who don't have enough stress or pressure in their lives are not actually performing, they're kind of rusting out. And I see that in my children at the moment. They're 12 and 14, and they're just not being stimulated enough. So I think I've just forgotten your question, Paul. Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
I went off.
Of course, no problem. We're talking about, you know, resilience and well-being, and where does stress fit in with this in your experience?
Oh, is it? Yes, sorry. Yes, I think stress fits in that. Stress comes, it's the kind of the external things, and if you are resilient and if you are well, you are going to experience less stress. So stress comes from the creation of our thoughts, essentially. So we actually create the stress for ourselves. So we've overloaded ourselves, we're doing too much, and this is releasing cortisol into our systems. And we know that when we have high circulating cortisol, you know, parts of our brain are not working as well as they are. The hippocampus is, the size is reduced, and that's your emotional regulation part, and you're over emotional, the amygdala is increased. But we create the stress. Essentially, we are not living in the moment. We are frequently either reliving something that happened, or we're pre-living. So we're saying, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that person thinks that about me? What if I lose my job? What if I can't do it? And it's us, or the story that we're creating in our head. So I think if you are resilient, you are much more self-aware. If you are well, so you're physically, emotionally, occupationally, spiritually, whatever that means for you, well, you are much more able to deal with stress. And actually the stress almost, you know, completely dissipates in your life. You will still have the external trigger, but you have the capacity within that space between the trigger and your response to choose how you would like to respond. And you can respond in a very high stress, you know, fight, flight, freeze state, or you can respond in, you know, that kind of meta adult way. I'm absolutely not saying that's easy. The limbic system is 5 times quicker. Steve Peters actually talks in the chimp paradox about, you know, your chimp coming out. And yes, you can't control that coming out, but when it comes out, you are 100% responsible for how it behaves. So you can choose if you're going to jump up and down and throw bananas at people, or you can choose that, oh yes, this thing is happening in front of me. Now, the meaning that I place on that is going to determine how I feel. And there's a great book, I forget the author, but I'm happy to send you the link. She talks about the neurons, and we have motor neurons and association neurons, and this is the biological basis of choice. Essentially, we can choose which neuron is triggered. So we are choosing, you know, if a fish swim, you know, we're swimming and a fish swim past, we can choose now, do we trigger and kind of freak out, or do we just observe the fish brushing our skin? And so I think stress, if you are a resilient person and you have that awareness and those skills and you are well, you really don't have the stress. You still have the things that happen, the tsunami, you know, the weather, the government, the COVID, but you do not react in that way. You do not experience that stress. You know, essentially we create the release of that cocktail of neurotransmitters ourselves, and we do that from our culture, our family, our experiences, you know, all of our senses coming in, and our brain says, oh, this seems like such and such and such. We need to release adrenaline and cortisol, and, you know, you need to fight. But we have a choice over that.
Yeah, I really like that fish analogy, Becky. It really does paint quite a strong picture, doesn't it? And I understand that you work with clients who are working in high performance positions, and they're going through, you know, many stress levels, you know, pretty much day in, day out. So if you do come across a client who is going through those stressful stages in their life, what kind of framework could you offer to them, or what kind of stepping stones could they take to help reduce or manage that stress going forward?
Absolutely, great question. I think, I mean, there's some really simple tools, and I'll talk you through one that I've kind of developed more recently. There's other things, I mean, about understanding the workplace, and there's things like productivity hacks, you know, time efficiency. There's understanding, you know, the relationships that we have in work, like the drama triangle and transactional analysis, and we teach those sorts of things, and being within your control, you know, staying within your power, not being kind of backed into situations. So there's all those sorts of tools that you do need to practice. I mean, they are absolutely a practice. I think right in the moment, the thing that I tell clients and teach clients is, it's the word brain. So, you know, our brain gets us into this stress, so our brain can get us out of this stress. So I've come up with this little model, or whatever you'd call it. So think about the word brain, and this is what you can do to help you get back into a resourceful state. So the B is for breathe. So first of all, is to start thinking about your breathing. When we're stressed, we're typically breathing right at the top of our chest, quite sort of shallow breaths. So change your breathing. So breathe out for longer than you're breathing in, and that breath, that longer breath out, start signaling to your brain, okay, everything's okay. So or take a few deep breaths. So just that kind of so that's the initial thing, or notice how you're breathing and change that. And then the R is for recognize. So recognize what's going on for you. So just take that second to say, and it could be something tangible. Am I hungry, angry, late, or tired? And that's actually used by there's a poster for the surgeons in the big hospital I work near and work with. Sometimes they have this poster which says halt. So you cannot operate if you are hungry, angry, late, or tired. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe you've had too much coffee that day. Maybe you've got a hangover. Maybe it's the time of the month. Maybe you're really tired. You didn't get a good night. So just start to recognize what might be going on for me. The A is for acceptance, and accept. Okay, that's fine. I'm here now. I'm feeling this emotion. And that is okay. Every human emotion is okay. There's no good emotion, no bad emotion. They all give us different information and signals. They're there, to help us. So the acceptance of it, rather than kind of the Buddhists talk about taking the second arrow. So the first arrow is the thing that's happened. The second arrow is you beating yourself up or stabbing yourself, for feeling that way. So rather than say, oh, I can't control my anger, it's acceptance. Okay, I feel angry. That's fine. The I is for the inquiry then. Okay, I'm feeling this. What am I thinking? What's the story in my head? What am I believing to be true here? Who would I be if I wasn't thinking that? If I didn't have that thought, what would it feel like? So that's the inquiry stage. I mean, I'm brushing over these really, really quickly, but and I'm happy to go through it again. And the N is for the now. Okay, so now I can, and I have the choice. So now I can tell myself a different story. Now I can go for a walk. Now I need to eat something. I'm hangry, and that's all that's going on. I'm tired. I just need to go to bed. I need to take a break from that person. I need to have a bigger conversation with that person. I need to, whatever it is, send an email, not send an email, dance around the kitchen, change my state. And there's lots of those tools then, to help you change the state as well. But I think if you're in that really high stress position, you can do that very quickly in your own head. You don't need to kind of go off and do something else. And I think to remember that model and to use that, you won't always have that time. You might be in a meeting, but even in a meeting, you can say, and you can use your boundaries, and you can say, I just need to think about that a moment. And you're quite within your rights to do that. If you can take a break or say, can we have just a quick comfort break, and we'll come back to this later, then do that too.
Okay, so looking into the future, what's in the future for you, do you think?
Wow, gosh, well, I mean, I've got lots of plans. I really have a huge passion for sustainable health food companies, and I would really, really love to do more work with those companies. Essentially, I'm going to carry on with my coaching and helping employees to feel better at work, and in turn helping those companies to be more successful, more productive, and to do what they do best. So I think, for me, it's I love the one-to-one coaching, and I love the teaching element as well. So I'm really happy when I'm able to talk to people and help them to see that moment where they kind of have that aha of, I've never really thought about it like that. It can be really simple things sometimes that can make a very big difference. So for me, essentially, it's continuing with the work that I do, but also I really want to make an impact. One of my values is around the environment, and so if I can work with those companies that are doing really fantastic things in a very sustainable, moral, ethical way, and if I can help them be successful doing what I love doing, then absolutely that's what I want to be working towards and putting my attention and energy into.
I love it. Thank you, Becky, for really, for everything you've given us today. We have got a lot of input. The brain, the halts, that's, very, it's going to stay in my brain for a long time, I think. So it's been great having you, Becky. Before we leave this before we end the conversation, we would like to ask you some very quick fire questions, just so the audience can get to know the Becky as the human being, the individual, rather than the Becky, the coach. So we're going to give you some on the spot questions, and you just need to answer as soon as you can, as fast as you can.
Okay.
As well.
Yeah,
You go?
sure.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So,
I'm good to go.
first question is, Becky, who is your hero?
That's a really easy one. So I actually was on a course recently with Cambridge University. It was a women in leadership course, and I had to think about, right, really, who would my hero be? And actually pinned up on my wall here, I'll just take it off. I will show you my hero. It's Charlize Theron. And if you think that she is just an actress, I would definitely go and have a look at her life. I mean, just as an example, in 2008, she was named the United Nations Messenger of Peace. She's done some absolutely hugely incredible work, as well as being a real kick-ass female actress. Yeah, so have a look at what she's up to.
Awesome.
Great, Becky. So you're out walking on a beach, and a person comes up to you, and the person asks you, what would be the 3 most important life skills I should have? What would you say?
Wow, I think most important maybe would be something like autonomy. So an ability to kind of manage yourself and be your own adult, be your own coach. And when I'm coaching, and coaching relationships certainly is helping the individual to learn those skills so that they can self-coach. So I think that's a really, really important skill. I think, you know, other emotional intelligence skills, so that self-awareness would be a really key one. Obviously, resilience for me is really, really key. So you want the awareness, and then you want the tools to be able to deal with it, and you want to be able to manage that yourself. So I think those 3 things are really, really important life skills that I think we should be teaching our children.
Yes.
Becky, what is your proudest accomplishment to date?
Well, wow. I know lots of people say having children and you know, things like that. I mean, I've got 2 amazing, beautiful children, but I think for me, it's probably having the courage to be the person that I want to be, and to do exactly what I want to do, and to bring that into all aspects of my life, to really be true to my values, and who I want to be. And I think sometimes that's quite a challenging thing to do. I'm reading a great book actually by Bell Hooks at the moment about love, and actually there's a whole chapter in there about how we're taught to lie as children. We're taught to pretend that we don't feel a certain way, or try and fit in all the time. Brené Brown actually talks a lot about belonging and fitting in, and how we alter ourselves to kind of be something that we're not. And I think a real accomplishment for any person is moving away from that and saying, this is who I want to be, and this is how I want to be, and this is really me. And so I think for me, it would be that. That's not without its challenges, and that's not to say that is easy to do, but I think that's why it makes it an accomplishment.
Final question for me, Becky. If you were cooking, what would be your favorite meal to cook?
I have so many. I absolutely love food. I love cooking. That's a really difficult question that I don't think I've ever been able to answer. There's not one one thing, but I think it would be something around, I mean, I'm really hugely into the kind of plant-based diet. I'm definitely against the whole dairy industry, so it'd be something, you know, kind of lots of vegetables, spices, lots of flavor, something like that. I mean, if I do sometimes eat meat or fish, it's got to be really well sourced, and you know, outdoor bred and organic and sustainable. Yeah.
And my last question for me, Becky, is what is Becky's definition of success?
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, success means so many different things to different people, doesn't it? I think for me, I think definition of success is that I am progressing, that I have moved forward from the person I was yesterday. So maybe that's a very small amount, maybe that's, you know, insignificant to other people, but I think if I have moved or better, and I'm using that word, you know, loosely again, that has a definition for me, then that is a success. It's in the consistency, it's in the progress, it's in the self-awareness. So for me it's that, and also if I can impact other people, if I can be the best version of me, that impacts on other people as well. You know, if I'm well and happy and fulfilled, I am going to be a better friend, parent, coach, employee, you know. So I think also that I'm taking ownership, and that is success for me.
Awesome. So the self-awareness, consistency, and the ownership as a whole, as a package, eh? So
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having yourself, you know, having the time to have you on the show today. It's been amazing. Where can people find you on social media if they wanted to follow you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so my name, Becky Balzano. So my website is Becky Balzano Coaching, not very original, .co.uk, and same with the Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm on there as well. So yeah, just by using my name. So